Hey guys, I'm Kevin. In today's lesson, we are going to check out how to change the strings on our uke. I know a lot of you have asked me this question, so I thought this would be a good topic to tackle in today's video. So we're going to talk about the tools we need, and ultimately I'm going to show you a step-by-step procedure in how to get your strings changed, get you back sounding good. Let's get to it. First things first, the main thing that you need is strings. I'm going to be using the Kala Elite Series brown fluorocarbon ukulele strings. Standard set, they're made by Worth, and they come with a high G and a low G. The next thing that I think is really helpful to have is a string winding tool. So the string winding tool that I prefer is this Planet Waves device here because it has multi-tools. So I have the ability to cut the strings with a string cutter, and it also has the string winding tool that you can use to put on the tuning heads as you loosen and tighten the strings. So this kind of helps speed up the process quite a bit, and you don't need to use pliers or anything like that that's going to potentially damage the wood of the instrument. You can use the kind of more simplistic version of this, just kind of a regular string winding tool. And the next component here I think is a really great tool to have is a clip-on tuner. I'm using a Snark clip-on tuner here today. Now some additional things that I like to have at my disposal when I'm changing strings. I like to use fingerboard conditioner so that I can polish the frets, and also some guitar polish. You can use this for ukulele wood as well. I like to have a couple of rags with me. I use two separate rags. One is a microfiber that I use when I put the guitar polish on, and then I kind of just keep some old little small rags to use for my fingerboard conditioner. One more additional component that I think is really nice to have on hand is this rock and roller neck rest. This keeps the neck in place if you're going to be working on a table, which you're going to be doing today. Keeps everything in front of you supported, and keeps the neck elevated off the table so that you can actually get to the tuning heads, get to the strings, and everything stays in place. Okay, so first things first here, we need to remove the strings so we can put the new ones on. So maybe you've broken a string and you have one string that's already missing. In this case here, the strings are on. We're just going to do a fresh change here. Now, the first string that I'm going to take off here is the A string. And the reason I'm going to do that is because all of the other strings are kind of tied underneath here at the back of the bridge, and I want to kind of just gradually get them off one at a time. So I'm going to start on the A string, and this kind of seems like a simple thing here, but I want to make sure I'm taking off the right string that matches the tuning head. So I kind of follow my A string here with my finger, I get down, and then I attach my string winding tool, and we're going to turn this clockwise as we go here. So this will loosen the string, and you can get this going pretty quickly. You can imagine how many rotations you'd be doing with your fingers and your thumb. So another reason to get this string tool. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to check to see how loose I'm getting. At some point here, the string will be loose enough that I can just kind of manually take it and remove it from the tuning peg. So now I'm loosening this here, and I'm going to go and I'm going to undo this little knot that they've put in here. And actually what they do is they put the string through twice, which we'll get to that later. But so I remove this string from the tuning peg. Now it's loose, and I'm going to follow it down here towards the bridge, and I'm going to grab the edge of the string here and just pull the string out of the loop that we made. And I'm going to show you guys how to make these loops later, but we just pull the string off, and then I'm grabbing the loop here at the end, and I've got the tag end here, and I'm just going to pull this through because the string's already cut. I can pull it right through the bridge and remove that string. So I have the string off. My cat really likes to play with these when I try to change my uke strings, which is a whole lot of fun to play. And then we have these little tag ends here that are underneath. So I'll show you how to do that later, but that's how we're going to take off the strings. So I take the A string off, and then I'm going to go through here and take the E, C, and G strings off to follow, and we're going to remove all of the strings from the uke. Okay, so now we have the strings off of the uke, and now we can kind of see that there's some dusty spots here because maybe the uke's been sitting in the corner hanging up, you know, there's dust around. So I always see this as a great opportunity to clean my uke up, get the frets conditioned, and make it look nice while the strings are off. So the thing I like to do first is I take some guitar polish, and I take my microfiber rag here, and I'm just going to spray some of the polish onto the rag. And as I do that, I'm gonna go over here and just kind of find my dusty areas. You can kind of get some of this dust off first before you get the polish on. It'll kind of stop it from caking as much. But then I kind of just start going at it here with my microfiber. And as you can see, it really polishes it up nice and kind of brings some of the life back to the wood. So if your uke's been sitting for a while with the same set of strings, you get a new set of strings and kind of a brand new looking uke as you go. So I try to take the microfiber and get it, you know, nice and tight here to the bridge as I go to kind of get any of those little areas where dust may collect, any stray hairs from the dog or the cat, you know, they kind of attach themselves to your uke sometimes as well. So I kind of go through there and do that to the top. And then I'll flip the uke over and kind of show you, kind of just go around here. And I just do the entire body of the uke as well. The other main area that I like to get the polish on here, and I'm just going to add a little bit more as I kind of dry up on my microfiber. I'm going to make sure you shake that polish well too. And then I go with the headstock. And I do the same thing, kind of work my way around, really polish up that logo nice, get any of those crevices here where dust may collect, even those out. And I'm kind of just using my index finger here, propped inside of the microfiber, so I can kind of get all these little nooks and crannies to make the headstock look better as well, because that's kind of our showpiece of the uke most of the time. Clean that up nice, and now we're ready to kind of turn it over and go through and get the rest of this uke cleaned up here. All right, so the next step here we're gonna take is we're gonna put on some fingerboard conditioner. And then what I like to do is I just kind of dab this on, you know, one fret at a time. So I kind of actually just go right down the fretboard here, and this is nice because I've kind of got this tilt here because of our neck rest. I can just kind of go between the frets and just add my fret conditioner. So if you need more, you can always add more, but I like it because it kind of drips into the fret where all of that kind of griminess can collect on your fingerboard here. So this, you're going to see, kind of really brings some more life back to the fingerboard. And your fingerboard takes a lot of abuse because your fingertips are on it all the time. So anything that's on your fingers ultimately ends up on your fingerboard. And that's why we kind of condition this out, bring a little life back to the wood. So I'm going to add a little more here to some of these. We can always buff it off. Now this will look a little different depending on what the wood is on your fingerboard. This is a little lighter grain, so it's not going to show as dark. But, you know, if you have an ebony fretboard or rosewood, it may look a little different as you do this here. But I'm kind of just buffing this through, making sure I'm trying to really get some of this solution into the wood. And it's going to keep this wood hydrated. It's going to last longer. And if you do this every time you change strings, your fingerboard's just going to look nicer in general and last longer. I'm going to kind of put a little bit more here towards the end. So we have some last couple frets here. So our frets are looking good now. We've got the polish on the body. Just kind of just doing one more once over using any extra fret conditioner I have here. And now we're looking good. Sometimes I will also do this, add a little solution directly to my rag, and then I'll also kind of go over my bridge with this and kind of condition the wood here as well. Sometimes it's nice to kind of just give it a little hydration because it doesn't get touched very much down here on the bridge, but it does kind of bring the aesthetic back to it a little bit. And if I get a little bit on the body of the uke, it's okay. I can just kind of buff that off as well with my other rags. So you can see here though, this kind of darkens up my bridge, makes it look a little bit nicer. Also kind of gets a little bit of that dust and grime that collects off of there. And then we can kind of just buff this off of the body. And now we're looking in good shape. So we have our polish on, we have our strings off, our fretboard is conditioned. We take a look over it and we say, all right, I think it's time to put on our new set of strings. I like to start with my top string, which is the G string. So on the package, it says G 4th string, and I want to just make sure that I'm doing that right. Now I have the top of the uke facing me, so I know that this is my G string slot here that I'm going to be working with. Now this is a longer string. This could be used for a tenor, a super tenor, a concert, or a soprano. So it's quite a long string, so you have a lot of tag end to work with, which is really nice to have because mistakes happen when you're doing this sometimes, and it's nice to have extra string to work with. And you're going to find that there is a little bitty hole here in our bridge, and we're going to take the string here from the inside, the sound hole side, and we're going to run it through towards the back of the uke. So I just push that through, and I'm going to bring out about, I'd say, 6 inches of string here, because as I take my full string, I see that I have a good extra foot of tag end, so I don't need a ton of extra string down here. However, I do want to make sure that I'm going to have enough string to kind of ride down the bottom of the bridge. If you've seen a lot of ukuleles, you know that you'll see the strings that are kind of tied in the back here. So I want to make sure that I leave enough tag end to get to the bottom of the actual bridge section here of the uke. So let's say we leave maybe 6 to 8 inches to be safe. We can always cut off more. We can't add more string. So we have this string now through the little hole here in the bridge. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to make a little loop here with this end of the string. Now I make this little loop, and maybe I just take and put my index finger through it as I'm doing that. And I'm just going to wind this a couple of times. So I like to do about 3 revolutions. Here's what I have left. And your string might kind of try to turn on you a little bit here, but now you have this little loop section here at the end. Now what we're going to do, we're going to find the other end of the string. And when we have that other end, we're going to run it right through this loop. As we run it through the loop, we're going to pull all of that slack. There's quite a bit of slack here. And I pull that loop, and I'm holding the tag end here of the string. So I'm going to pull this tight, and now I can see how much of a tag end I have. So if I want to run this down the bottom of the bridge, I have enough to make it, which is great. And I have a good loop here, so I'm through. And I'm still with my left hand here holding my string. I want to make sure that I get this nice and tight. And as we tighten, it's going to be okay because we're going to get this loop even tighter. All right, so now we're going to move down to the headstock here. And something I want to note about the positioning of the tuning peg. So what I like to do is I like to have the slot of the tuning peg at an angle facing towards me. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want my rotation already started so that when I start actually tuning this, it's just going to follow along here. So I have my slack end, and I'm going to work this through the hole in the tuner here. Now as I do this, I'm going to kind of check to see how much slack that I need in the string. So I pull it here somewhat tight, so I still have a pretty loose string, but I want to make sure that I leave a little extra room here because I really want to make sure that I get a lot of rotations on this tuning peg as I go. We're going to leave this with a decent amount of slack. I would say kind of pulling this string about 6 to 7 inches off of the fretboard is pretty good test of that. Now I have my tag end, and I'm just going to find the end of this again. And we're going to double through the loop a second time. So we're going to go right through the hole again. And we're going to pull this tight. And this is what's going to make our knot, essentially, that we're going to use to tighten the string. So I want to make sure here that as I tighten this, this goes through. And we get a good bite as we do this. So now we have a pretty tight string on here. We have a decent amount of slack here with the other end. And we have this. So now that we have this tightened up here, sometimes what I'll do is I'll take both of my hands and grab this and kind of tighten it on. You can do this a lot easier with these nice loose strings. Now we're going to grab our string winding tool. We put this back on, and now this is an important thing here. I want to make sure that I'm holding the string as I do this. So with my right hand, I grab the string here over the neck. And this is where it's really nice to have this neck brace. So I'm putting pressure on the string, and I'm going to start turning this counterclockwise and start running the string onto the tuning head. So I'm getting some good rotations here. And as I tighten, my fingers are kind of putting pressure on the string as we go. It's not putting pressure on that knot that's at the bridge. If we can keep this guiding down, it's better. So if you need to reposition this to kind of make sure that you're looping down as you go, that's a good thing. And as you can see here, we're kind of tightening up the slack as we go. Sometimes we need to kind of just get this extra tag end out of the way. We don't want to cut it yet though, so if you need to maneuver around it, that's okay. Now we're getting this nice tighter. I can start hearing a pitch coming out of the string. That's good. My knot is looking good. We have a nice pretty loop going here around the tuning head. So I kind of have this still pretty loose. I'm not going to tighten it all the way. So I kind of just get this string to a point where it's taut, not super tight, and it's kind of in a comfortable spot. And then I'm just going to leave this loose tag end here, because as we do the fine tuning later, we want to make sure that we have enough slack end that if anything goes wrong, we're still covered. We still have enough string to work with. Now we have our G string on here. And as you can see, the reason I chose to do the G string first is because I can kind of work my way down in real estate here. And as I do this, I can get the next C string in, and I don't have to fight around anything as if I were to do the C string first. That would kind of cause an issue. So it's nice here. I've got the G string, it's closest to me. And now we're going to work onto the C string, where I'm going to show you how to kind of work our string underneath the bridge. All right, so we're moving on to the C string here. I've identified that I'm using the correct string, and we're going to do the same procedure here. We're going to already pushed our string through from the inside out, and we're going to make a little loop here. I'm going to bring a little bit more string out this time because I feel like I was kind of being a little daring with my last string, so I'm going to leave a little more tag end this time around. Now the C string, I will mention, is a little harder to work with because it's a thicker string. So you might only be able to get a couple of rotations with this as you go, because you're not going to have as much room here on the bridge itself. So you might have to kind of experiment a little bit with that as you go. So now I have my loop. I'm going to run my tag through this again. I'm going to pull that string all the way through, and we're going to get the string down here to about this point. So at this point, this is an important step here, and this is really how you're going to make this look a lot nicer. So we have pulled this most of the way, and I have a loop here kind of sitting over the top of the bridge. Now with my G string, which was the first string that we put on, I have my tag end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put that through the hole here of the C string. So I have the G string going through the hole of the C string, and I'm trying to run that parallel to the bridge. Now you might have to kind of work with your hands here a little bit to make this work, but I'm trying to kind of hold that through, and I'm grabbing my C string, and I'm going to try to tighten that by pulling that. Now what I've done, and I'm going to continue to do this as I go, is I have my tag end from the G string that's underneath the C string. I'll do the same procedure with the C string as I do my next string, but we're going to kind of run these all parallel to the bridge as they go down before we cut them. And that's what you probably see on your uke right now. So this is how you achieve that. So I have that tied underneath, and then we're just going to work our way back down here to the headstock, where we're going to do the same procedure we did for the G string and attach that to the tuning head. All right, so we have now flipped the uke around so that the A string and the E string area are going to be facing me here. So I'm going to show you one more loop here at the bridge so I can show you kind of how these strings are going to continue to be guided down the bridge. So I have my E string work through the hole from the inside out again. I'm going to pull a little bit more slack. I'm going to create my loop. And then from that loop, we're just going to twist this up a couple times we can twist 3 to 4 times here with the E string. It's not quite as thick, so we have a little more room to twist. I have my loop now, and we take the string, run it through the loop, and we pull the slack here. And I noticed here my loop kind of came undone as I do that. That may happen to you. So all you have to do, it's okay, is just kind of re-loop that a few times. And then we just pull that end down again. So we don't want to pull it all the way tight though. We want to leave a little bit of a gap there because we're going to take our G string and our C string and put it through this little loop that we have here next to the bridge. So we have both the G and the C going through now. And as we have those pulled through, we're going to grab our E string and the tag end of our E string, and we're just going to tighten this. Now we can keep pulling on and adjusting our C and G string as we do this. And sometimes you might need to work on them a little bit to get them nice and tight here, but we haven't really tightened our strings all the way, so we're in good shape. We're going to follow that up here. Make sure that we're choosing the right tuning peg, which is the furthest one away from us on the headstock. I've already taken the time to kind of work this through one time. I want to make sure again that as I've turned my tuning peg here, I have the hole facing at me. So it's again at about a 45-degree angle like this, going towards the neck. So I have that through. And I notice here that maybe I didn't leave enough slack. So I'm just going to loosen this up just a little bit so I have some more room to work with. I grab the end here and we're going to go back through the hole, the end of the string. We're just going to pull that tight. Try to make sure that loop stays around the inside part of the tuning peg head. And we're just going to pull that tight. So now we have a nice little knot there. And again, we have our slack here. So I'm going to hold on to the slack. I'm going to grab my trusty tool here. And we're going to start turning this counterclockwise as we tighten the string. So I'm putting pressure on the string here with my left hand to hold that. I'm also very conscious that I'm making sure that I'm running the string through the correct guide. So again, just holding on to that. You can hold it pretty close. You can always try to get this slack out of the way. Sometimes I'll just try to tuck it down, but as you're dealing with all these strings, it can be tricky. And feel the string as you go. As you want, give it a pluck once in a while. You can hear that it's starting to make a pitch. You know you're going the right direction. So keep going with that. We're going to try to keep that string going down as we go. Getting some nice loops here. And we get this to a point where it's just about the same tight as the other strings. So now we have our last string here, which is the A string. So again, I'm going to run this through from the inside out. So I'm going to pull this down. And this may happen too. This is a good thing to point out is I feel like I've got one too many loops here that it might not attach itself. So I'm just going to pull out one of these loops. So I just have 3 good ones here. And I'm going to pull the slack, make this tight. And again, I want to make sure that I don't tighten all the way because I have my G, C, and E strings to fish through this last string. So I'm going to do that now. I'm just going to, doesn't really matter which order you go in, but you're just going to kind of take these strings, push them through the loop of the A string so that they're going to be tight to the bridge. So I have my C string through, my E string's trying to escape from me, but we're going to get that through as well. And then our final string here is to be pulled through. Okay, so now I have all 3 strings pulled through the loop of the A string. Kind of take those, maybe you rest your hand on here if you can, and try to grab the end, and then you're going to tighten your A string by grabbing both ends of it to kind of secure that knot. Now at this point, your strings are still fairly loose, So this is a good point to kind of check on your bridge here. So on the saddle, make sure your strings are kind of sitting. Maybe there'll be little notches from where they sat, but just kind of make sure everything is looking good down here at the bridge. If you see any gaps that you need to be tightening up, that's the time to do it. So we have all 4 strings attached now at the bridge. We can put this one on the tuning head and get this thing fine-tuned and sounding good with our new strings. Okay, so now we have all of our strings on. We've tightened them up to the point where they're still pretty loose. So they're gonna be showing a pitch, but now I've got my other tool here, which is my clip-on tuner. I'm gonna use my thumb to kind of continuously pluck the string that I'm tuning. So I'm gonna start with the G string here on top here. So with my left hand, I have my tuning machine, and then I'm gonna just start kind of working on this string, tightening it up, and I can hear the pitch increasing as I go, and I'm watching my tuning head as I do this, and I'm watching my tuner. So I'm working my way up here. And something that you should also do is kind of think about the tension of the string. And remember how tight the strings were when you started here, so don't be scared as you tune. I know sometimes kind of going through the octaves, it feels like the string is gonna snap, but generally they should not snap on you. So this is why you want to pluck as you go, so you can hear that pitch raising as you're tightening this up here. So I try to go at a gradual speed, so I'm not going too fast. You don't want to really put that much pressure on it that quick. So we're working our way up here. I'm going to speed up a little bit. I'm up to C, and I'm working my way all the way to get this closer to G. So I'm not going to go all the way to G because I still have some other strings to work on here. So I've gotten to a point where I feel like the string is getting pretty tight, and now I'm going to move on and do the same thing to the C string here. You can kind of see here that as you're doing this, the slack is going to be kind of moving around on you. So if you have to kind of push that out of the way, or maybe you set something on these slack ends to kind of keep the strings out of your work zone, that's cool. All right, so let's talk about the tuning/stretching component to this whole procedure. So I've went through with my string winding tool. I've got these pretty close to my G, C, E, A tuning, which I was trying to achieve. So at this point, I kind of put down my string winding tool, and I'm doing this by hand because I'm just doing really small rotations with the tuning peg. So again, I have my thumb to pluck the string, and as I bring my string into tune, I'll stop there and move on to the next one. I already just have seen this slip out of tune a little bit. So I had the string tuned to G, but when I checked it again, I can see that it's already went flat. That's a normal thing to happen. So don't be frustrated if you have to tune quite a few times. That's something I want you to take from this. You will have to tune quite a bit more often than you normally do, probably for about the first week, week and a half after you put a new set of strings on. So don't get discouraged if the strings aren't sitting perfectly in tune. But what I'm going to show you right now will help you lessen that time period the strings will take to stretch. So what I like to do here is, with my tuner on, I still have all my slack, so if any catastrophes happen, I still have extra string. But what I like to do is I'm going to grab the string with my index and thumb down here towards the sound hole, and then on the 5th fret, I'm going to press down. You can either use your index finger or your thumb if you like. Press that down, and what I'm going to do is actually kind of pull on this string, and I'm going to do this to each string. I'm going to kind of pull it up and try to stretch it out a little bit. Now you want to be careful. You don't want to go too far with this. I'm just kind of pulling this about an inch off of the fretboard. I do this a couple of times. And then what I do is I go back, and now I'm going to notice that the strings have went quite a bit more flat, and I'm going to tune them back up to pitch. So my C string slipped all the way down to B, so I'm going to bring that back to C. My E string went down a half step, I'm going to bring that up to E. Same thing with my A string. I'm going to bring that up back to A. So that process that I just went through there with the string stretching, maybe you do that 3 or 4 times, tune it, And then what you want to do is you want to play it a little bit, even with the tag ends on, just to make sure that you've tuned everything correctly. And again, that playing will pull the thing out of tune, and then you'll have to retune it again. So there'll be kind of quite a few retuning procedures that happen as you do this, but you're really close at this point, so the adjustments will be pretty minor. All right, so now we are going to cut off our excess strings. The great thing about this string winding tool here, the Planet Waves multi-tool, is we have a cutter built in right here. So we just take the string winding tool, open it up, it becomes a little pair of snips for us. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna make sure I grab the right string that I'm trying to cut here. I'm gonna get pretty close to the tuning head, but I'm going to be very careful here. You can always cut off more, but I'm just going to leave probably a ½ centimeter here of extra. You can get pretty close. You just want to be really careful you don't undo all of your work and cut that string. So I left that, I removed the end, and I'm going to move on here to the C string. All right, so now we're going to move down to the bridge where we have our last couple ends of slack to cut off here. So something that's very important to note about this is we're trying to line these strings up with the end of our bridge here. So not the actual longer piece of wood, but the shorter part here that sits on top of that piece of wood for the bridge. And we want to try to line these strings up with our cut as close as we can, because we don't want to have a lot of excess dangling out here, because they can tend to maybe catch your sleeves as you're playing or catch your hand as you're playing. You definitely don't want that. So you want to be really meticulous with this cut here. So I'm just going to start here with the closest string that's kind of sitting on top, and I'm going to get that as close as I can to the end of the bridge. And I see I've left just a little bit beyond there, so I'm going to go a little bit more off the end. And I'm going to be very careful because I almost clipped my other strings as I did that. So you really want to make sure that you're only getting the string clip that you want. And we do that. So now we're to the end there. That looks pretty good. And we're going to do the same thing. I see that my C string is kind of creeping through there, so we're going to get that one snipped. And the good thing is these are already pulled through, so you have plenty of room to work with. So my C string is now off, and this looks like maybe the E string that we're going to do now. So now we have those all nice and lined up there, and then our final string is the A string, which we're kind of just going to take a little bit of that down to right basically where the loop is at the end of the bridge. So we cut this nice and close. So, and now all of our strings are nice and aligned down here. With this A string, what I like to do sometimes is kind of tuck it back towards the strings here so it stays out of the way. You're going to push that down and kind of keep these nice. So if you want to go a little further with them, you can. If you end up catching them at any point, you can always kind of trim that off. But now, as you can see, we have everything cut off, we're tuned, our strings are stretched, our uke is cleaned up, we have put on our fret polish, we put on the body polish. It's really looking nice, we're in tune, and our uke is set to be played again with our new set of strings. Ah, perfect.